Chapter 17. She must have seen me pull up into the hotel forecourt from her room, because a few minutes later she came out, smiling and casually dressed in jeans. Her flying jacket and bright yellow sweater I hadn't seen before. It suited her, and I'd probably have said so if this had been the kind of day it had promised to be, but it wasn't. Not by any stretch of the imagination. "Hi, Chris," she said as she climbed into the car. "Are you okay?" "Fine. You look pensive." The inquest was a sombre business. "Yeah, I read the report in the paper. It can't have been as matter of fact as they made it sound." "It certainly wasn't, but it's over now." "Yes, it is. So are we going to the Lizard? Maybe some fresh air would cheer us both up." "Yes, let's go." I gritted out a smile and started driving east of Penzance and around Mount Bass towards Helston. The more I thought about it, the worse it became. She wasn't Michaela. This was a lie she concocted with Considine. They'd been in it together from the outset, even to the extent of planning a childhood photograph of Emma, or whatever her real name was, amongst Nicky's possessions. I'd seen a genuine childhood photograph of Michaela since then, fetched from the attic at Nanswerthal by Ethel Jago to banish my lingering doubts about her identification of her niece. There were nearly 30 years between it and the picture of the woman on the bed, but the face was the same. The face was Michaela's. Then it had all fallen into place. Emma had impersonated Michaela in order to play on my conscience, and so persuaded me to ferret out the family secret Considine was using to blackmail my father. Considine had supplied the information she needed to pull it off, confident in his belief that Michaela had been murdered by Brian Jakes. But the plans had gone awry. Michaela wasn't dead. Nicky's suicide must have touched her so deeply that she decided to punish my family for benefiting at his expense. I couldn't really blame her. In one way, I was actually grateful to her. Without the photograph she used to wreck Pam's marriage, I'd never have seen through Emma's ploy until I was meant to, of course. At some point, not very far down the line, I'd have had to discover the extent of my manipulation, but by then it wouldn't have mattered. She and Constantine would have pocketed £1,000,000 and disappeared. They only needed a few more days, just a few days, during which I could go on believing Trevor was Constantine's informant, and I was the best thing ever to have happened to Michaela Lanyon. By rights, they should have got clean away with it, leaving me to carry the can. I had no proof Emma even existed. I'd done as she'd asked and told no one about her. When Trevor finally convinced my father he had no part in the plot, and they came to me as the only other person who could have told Constantine about Tully's murder, what was I going to say? How was I going to explain what I'd unwittingly done? I felt bitter and angry, bewildered by how completely I'd been deceived. If only I'd been so pitifully eager to believe she was Michaela. But there was one bleak consolation. It wasn't yet beyond recall. The location of Tully's grave was exposed as a bluff. Now Trevor was in the clear. That left only the letters. If I could frighten Emma with the threat of turning her over to the police as an extortionist, maybe she'd agree to retrieve them and call it quits. What linked her with Constantine I had no way of knowing, but it seemed unlikely to be a bond of trust. Maybe he'd forced her into it. Maybe he had some kind of hold over her. I could offer to listen. He'd recognise Michaela when I showed him the photograph. That was obvious now, but he hadn't warned Emma of the danger it meant. She was in, otherwise she'd surely never have risked coming to Cornwall for the week. And did she know just how much money she was demanding? It would have been uncharacteristic of Constantine to deal fairly with anyone, even his partner in crime. My mind ran through ways of driving a wedge between them. As I headed southeast through Helston and out along the Coverack Road past the satellite dish of Goonhilly, I recounted what had happened at the inquest as I went, as naturally and methodically as I could, praying she wouldn't notice the flatness in my tone or the hardness behind my sidelong glances at her. I was aiming for the long, straight minor road that branches off across Goonhilly Downs towards Gadworth, reckoning she'd have nowhere and no one to run to if I stopped somewhere along it. The morning was cool and cloudy, with a strangely silvery quality to the light out on the wide Lizard headland. We were alone, unobserved and unconcealed, our destination travelling with us. "Where are we going?" she asked, when my account of the inquest dribbled away at last into silence I couldn't hold at bay. "It's not far." "But where? On the coast?" "No, not the coast. There's something wrong, Chris. Why don't you tell me what it is? What could be wrong? I don't know. That's the point. You don't know? We passed a small conifer plantation and I began to slow. Oh, I think you do. What is it? You're talking in riddles. Riddles, am I? I slowed to a crawl, pulled up onto the tussocky verge and stopped. When I turned off the engine, there was suddenly only the wind whispering in the gorge, the flat heath to either side, the ribbon of tarmac ahead and behind, this grey sky above us and the narrow space between. Solve this one for me, Emma, if you can. I turned and looked straight at her. You remember Pauline Lucas? I showed you her photograph. Yeah, what about her? You didn't recognize her, did you? No, of course not. That's odd. Why? Because you must have known each other as children. She stared at me, blinking rapidly. Sorry? You must have done. Your aunt has a photograph of Pauline, you see, taken when she was a child. I don't understand. Neither do I. But like all riddles, there is an answer. It's just not very obvious until you find out what it is. But when you do, everything else makes sense. What do you mean? Pauline Lucas is Michaela Lanyon, Emma. That's why she's pursuing a vendetta against my family, and why your little scheme has just gone off the rails. Her face froze. There was something startled, but also resourceful in her eyes. She said nothing, but I could sense her brain racing to find a solution to the problem. I sprung on her. What was it to be? A straight denial, or some more serpentine manoeuvre? Will she go on playing her card to the end, or abandon it here and now? Constantine assured you she was dead, didn't he? Then he invented that oh so plausible version of a life for her, and persuaded you to pass it off as the real thing. It couldn't go wrong, could it? Not once you'd convinced me you were Michaela and sworn me to secrecy on the ground you were still frightened of the man who abused you as a child. A neat touch, that. Very neat, based on the truth, perhaps. Constantine doesn't like to waste anything, even the details of his own perversions. Still, nothing for you to worry about. All ancient history except that Michaela isn't dead. What makes your impersonation of her look all the sickler and mean, just in case you're considering that going on with the pretense is pointless. Still, she said nothing. She licked her lips and glanced out through the windscreen, then looked back at me, weighing her options carefully, seemingly too preoccupied with the predicament to show even a hint of shame. I know what you've done, and so do you. You made me trust you and like you and regard you as a friend. You exploited a dead man and damaged woman to implement a sordid scam. And when I want to know is why. Don't tell me it was just for the money. Firstly, because you have to be a fool to trust Constantine to share it with you. Secondly, because it would make this whole thing so utterly contemptible. And I like to believe, I really would, that your motives weren't totally mercenary. They weren't. Her gaze fell as she spoke. I'm sorry, Chris. God, I'm sorry. For a moment I thought she was about to cry. It's a bit late to be sorry, and yeah, I know, but, she looked at me. There's so much you don't understand. What? Here, I'll show you. She leaned forward, gathered up her handbag from where it had been resting on the floor and settled it on her lap. It's all so crazy, really. Does Constantine have something on you? I asked, prepared to sound sympathetic. Not exactly. She unzipped the bag and reached inside. More the other way around, actually. Then she smiled, and I saw the gun in her hand, pointed straight at me. She clicked back the trigger. You better believe this is loaded, Chris. I'll use it if I have to. I gaped at the rock-steady muzzle of the gun, wondering for a second if I was dreaming. But when I looked up into her cold, hard eyes, I knew I wasn't. You wouldn't do it, I said, feeling less than confident of that. Yes, I would. I think you know that. I wouldn't have got this far without being prepared to take drastic action if need be. Her voice had changed. The fragile persona of Michaela Lanyon had been sloughed off like a snake's skin. The steely calculated woman who was holding a gun at me was a real Emma Marasco. Put your wallet on the dashboard, then get out and start walking straight ahead. Leave the keys in ignition. I'll take the car. We part here, I'm afraid. Hold on. Just do it. No debate, no delay. I slowly lifted my wallet out of my pocket and tossed it into the angle of the windscreen. Short of cash, Emma? You'll get it back. The car too. I'll leave them in Pangbourne. I just need to slow you down long enough to make pursuit useless. I'll find you sooner or later. No, you won't. The supermarket job, the high-rise flat, the London phone number, they're all about to vanish along with me. What about Constantine? Just make sure he has the rest of the money by Friday. He'll destroy the letters on receipt. How can I be sure of that? You can't. But once you made him a millionaire, he can hardly expose your father as a murderer without exposing himself as an extortionist. What you can be sure of is that he'll use the murder to destroy your family if he isn't paid on time. Now get out of the car. I opened the door and climbed down, and awareness of my own folly growing as fear subsided. I'd chosen this spot to place her at a disadvantage, but suddenly the disadvantage was all mine. She slipped out of her side of the car as I left and was training the gun on me now across the room. Start walking. It doesn't end here, you know. For you and me, it does. Get moving. I began to walk away, listening to my footfalls on the tarmac, judging the gap as it stretched behind me. A minute also passed, and I heard the familiar note of the stag engine starting. I swung round to see it complete a bumping U-turn between the verges of the road, then roar off the distance, back the way it would come. I stood where I was for a moment, watching it dwindle from sight, then listening as the sound of it accelerated engine fading away. Finally, there was only a black horizon and a silent sky. I swore, turned on my heel, and strode away. It was about a mile to the first hamlet. I had enough loose change to phone for a taxi from the call box there, but it took half an hour to arrive, and Emma had the best part of a 2-hour start by the time I reached Trudor House. I persuaded Pam to pay off the taxi driver, loan me the train fare to Pangbourne, and drive me to station. She was clearly sceptical of my claim to have been the victim of a car thief, since if that was the case, I would have been reporting the matter to the police rather than racing to catch the next train home. And she also suspected a connection with the bizarre behaviour of another of her relatives. Dad left for Tenerife this morning, she announced, as we sped around the bypass to see Trevor. According to Mum, do you know anything about it? Afraid not. He's been behaving oddly of late. Apparently, I suppose you wouldn't know anything about that either. You're right, I don't. What are you two up to? Nothing. I don't believe you. For God's sake, Pam, what could we be up to? I don't know, but I still don't believe you. It was early evening when I arrived in Pangbourne, wondering if Emma really had left the car there. My house keys were on the same ring as the ignition key, so I was going to be in dire straits if she hadn't. But what about that? At least she'd been as good as her word. The keys were actually hanging in the front door lock, with the stag stowed neatly in the garage and my wallet lying on the passenger seat. I had long enough on the train to plan my next move, and it still seemed the best, the only thing I could do. So despite the weariness that was beginning to drag at my thoughts, I got the car out and headed for Clacton. Emma would be long gone wherever I chose to look for her. I knew that, but I also knew how far her ruthlessness had surpassed my expectation. It meant she wasn't the junior partner. She was altogether too self-controlled to be Constantine's pawn. Perhaps it was, as she herself had said, more the other way around. If so, Constantine was the weak link, and he was going to find it rather more difficult to vanish into thin air. Drizzle was blurring the amber halos of the street lamps when I climbed out of the car 4 hours later. I walked along the damp, deserted pavement towards 17 Wharfdale Road, Clacton. Constantine's windows were in darkness, the curtains open, but revealing nothing beyond the neon splash back of a dressing table in one of the bedrooms. I pressed the bell and heard it ring inside, but no sound of movement followed. It looked and felt like an empty house. It looked and felt indeed as if Neville Constantine had done a bunk. I rang a few more times and tried the knocker, all to no avail. Then I prized open the letterbox and peered through, but only could see the vague outline of the staircase. There was no sign of life, but next door was a different matter. As I stepped back out of the porch, a bedroom window in number 19 squealed open, and a voice carried tetchily down to me. "Give it a rest, for goodness sake, will you? There's no one at home. I'm sorry if I disturbed you," I replied, squinting up at a pyjama-clad shape. "I'm looking for Neville Constantine." "So I guess. It's a matter of considerable urgency." "Well, he's gone away." "Do you know where or for how long?" "For a few days," he said. "No idea where. Do you want me to tell him you called?" "No, thanks. That won't be necessary." So Constantine, too, had gone to ground, presumably warned by Emma, and I might come looking for him. My hopes of finding a crack in their allegiance were dwindling, along with my hopes of settling eyes on either of them before Friday. I drove down to the seafront and trudged out into the beach, where the waves were breaking slackly beneath a starless sky, like the lanyards in their flight from Truro. I'd come to the end here, where the Essex coast shelved gently into the North Sea. Constantine must have guessed there was a secret waiting to be uncovered in the tragic history of the Lanyards, but he needed to help needed the help of an insider to discover what it was. I was his choice, and he'd gone into partnership with Emma Roscoe in order to recruit me. How amply I'd repaid his off how amply I'd repaid his efforts. Oh yes, I'd done his work well, all too well. My reward was to know the truth at last, and to watch others profit from it. There was a kind of justice in it, the harsh and arbitrary kind that had claimed Michael Lanyon. There was almost a rightness about it, but the taste it left in my mouth was bitter, and it was growing more bitter all the time. I knew what would happen next. I went home and waited, judging I wouldn't have to wait for long. And I was right. By Thursday, my father was back from Tenerife looking for answers. He arrived in Pangbourne that afternoon, straight from the airport, and as soon as I opened the door to him, it was clear he was even angrier than I'd expected. Trevor didn't tell Constantine. I know. Then how the bloody hell did he find out? I told him. You. There was a girl that set me up between them. I don't have any excuses, and I don't think you want to hear any explanation. The fact is, I'm responsible. Good God, I can't believe it, even of you. You're going to have to. How could you be so stupid? A girl, is that all it took? Say what you like, nothing's going to change. I was tricked into confiding in somebody who was actually working for Constantine. The result's the same, pay up or suffer the consequence. £1,000,000 because you couldn't hold your tongue? If that's how you want to look at it, yes. They don't know where Tully's buried, but they have the letters and ability to do you a lot of harm. The choice is yours. What kind of choice is that? The kind you face. Thanks to you. I shrugged. And what guarantee do I have that they'll destroy the letters? None at all. Marvellous. Well, you can kiss goodbye to any kind of inheritance after this, boy, that's for sure. I already have. You've got nothing out of me from this moment on. I never expected to. I mean it, Chris. I can overlook a lot, but betraying your own family, it's too much. It's too bloody much. As far as betrayal goes, maybe we're about even now. Either way, I don't need a lecture from you about anything. The door's over there. You ungrateful fool. You've said enough, Dad, and so have I. Just go. Leave me alone. That's exactly what I mean to do. I'll leave you well alone in the future. In fact, I'll do my best to pretend you don't even exist. Fine. I don't understand you at all. You know that. You never have, as far as I'm concerned, Paul. You can go to hell. Goodbye, Dad. After my father left, I did something I hadn't done for more than 10 years. I went out and got drunk. You're never cured, only reformed, they say, and that night proved the point. I felt demeaned by my failure to understand whose purpose I'd really been serving over the past few weeks, diminished by the loss of what had turned out only to be a sham of growing affection, above all dejected at the emptiness I was left with. Alcoholism is partly a loss of self-respect. Well, I hadn't so much lost it as had it stolen from me, but the result was the same. I took one drink knowing I'd take another and another after that. Then nothing mattered anymore. The future was unimportant. The past couldn't touch me, and the present was a blur. I encountered Mark Foster in one of the local pubs. He was keen to discuss his employment prospects, but my condition must have made him rate them pretty poor. When Napier Classic convertibles were concerned, he ended up taking me home and all but putting me to bed. I woke next day to a steam hamper hangover and a black cloud of self-disgust. I was horrified by how easily I'd slip back into using alcohol as a prop, and by what the lapse suggested was I just a fair weather abstainer. If so, every day since I pulled myself out of the gutter had been a waste of time and effort. I couldn't let myself believe that. The possibility was not only appalling but sobering. As soon as a gallon of tea had blunted my hangover, I drove up into the Lambourne Downs and walked 1 mile or so along the ridgeway into the teeth of a cleansing westerly. That seemed to give me the perspective I needed. However gullible I'd been, however culpable, I'll only make a still bigger fool of myself by giving way to a self-pity. It was time to put my house in order. When I got back to Pangbourne that afternoon, I telephoned my bank and made my appointment to see the loan manager on Monday. I needed advance on however much the insurance company ultimately coughed up if I was to get the business back off the ground. Then I went to see Mark and told him the score. He was visibly relieved that I was stirring myself and happy to forget all about my exhibition the previous night. I planned to devote the weekend to spying out possible new premises and preparing a realistic set of figures to show the bank. The irony didn't escape me that while I was scraping around for funds, my father had just handed £1,000,000 over to a stranger. At least I assume he had. In the circumstances, I didn't expect him to keep me informed. As to the letters, the destruction was, as Emma has implied, a technicality. £1 million verbally paid over would look too much like hush money if it ever came to light for them to risk asking for more. Besides, she needed more than £1 million. They'd surely be satisfied with that, just as I'd have to be satisfied with whatever the future held for a hard-pressed car restaurant on the brink of a middle age. But if I thought drawing a line under the recent past was a decision for me alone to take, I soon had a rude awakening. I just got home from a tour of potential workshop sites on Saturday afternoon when the telephone rang. The caller's voice was instantly and bewilderingly familiar. You made it back to Cornwall okay then, Emma? Yeah, don't put down the phone, Chris. Give me one good reason why I shouldn't. You don't know the whole story. I'm just as much a victim as you are. You said something like that on Tuesday, the second before you pulled out a gun on me. I had no choice. I had to get away from you. Otherwise, Candaceine would have what I can explain now. He has the money, and I like to. Honestly, I don't want you to hate me. Please listen to me. I'm listening. I can tell you over the phone. I can't tell you over the phone. Can I come to your house this evening? We have to talk. Please, Chris, give me one more chance. I can't stop you coming out. But will you hear me out if I do? Maybe. I suppose I have to settle for that. Will you be alone? Yes. All right. Look, it could be late. I have to make sure. Well, I'll be there. Okay. If you say so. See you later then. And Chris, yes, I am sorry. And so she should have been, as it turned out, because the phone calls evidently just a firewall hoax. I waited all evening and with ever decreasing patience, and there was no sign of her. The telephone rang just after midnight when I was about to give up and go to bed, but as soon as I answered the phone on the other end rang off. I didn't know what to make of her failure to show up. Everything else she'd done had served a purpose, however devious. But what purpose could there be in stringing me along now the ransom had been paid? The only way I could find, despite her, was not to exhaust myself thinking about it. I could put her out of my mind, not yet, but at least I could have behaved as if I had. By Monday morning, I was thinking more about my pending interview at the bank than Emma Marasco's machinations. I was on the point of setting off, dressed in a suit I judged would look businesslike but not affluent, and was giving my tie a fine adjustment in the hall mirror when the doorbell rang. My visitor was a stocky-built, hard-faced man in a raincoat, dark hair streaked with grey ruffling in the wind, above heavy-lidded eyes that gave him a look of boredom mixed with scepticism. Mr. Napier? Yes, I'm Chris Napier. What can I do for you? Detective Inspector Jordan XSCID. He flourished a warrant card. Mind if I have a word? Well, I'm a bit of a hurry, actually. Won't take long. All right, step inside. Thanks. He followed me into the lounge, closing the front door behind him. Essex, you say, Inspector. Aren't you rather a long way from home? Getting a response, I added. How can I help you? Already I was apprehensive. Essex meant only one thing to me. Neville Considine. This yours, sir? Jordan held out one of my business cards for inspection. Since I handed them out by the dozen at Classic Car Show, it was hardly a collector's items, and not in confirmation. And you're the proprietor? Yes. They're not very much at present, I gather. I called at the dress showing Station Road. They said you'd had a fire at your workshop recently. Gotcha, apparently. That's right. But I don't quite see. We found your card in the wallet of a man murdered in Essex over the weekend. Wondered if he might have been a client of yours. What's his name? Neville Frederick Considine. Seeing the startled look of recognition that crossed my face, he went on. I take it you did know him, sir. Yes, I did. That was not a client. What happened? We're trying to establish that. Do you know Clacton at all? Slightly. Jaywick? I've been there. Really? It's not exactly on the tourist route. I didn't go as a tourist. As what then, sir? I used to know someone who lived there. Look, are you... Jaywick's where Mr. Considine was found, by the old sea wall where the chalet fizzled out and the marshes begin. A man walked in his dog came across the body yesterday morning. How long has he been, I mean? I think he was killed late Saturday night. Where were you on Saturday night, incidentally, sir? Here, alone, yes. Nobody who could corroborate that, is there? No, but there wouldn't be. I live alone, Inspector. Quite, sir, yes. Take your point. There was Constantine. I mean, was he killed at Jaywood or jumped there afterwards? Why do you ask, sir? I just can't think of any reason for him to go there. Know him well then, do you, sir? I wouldn't say so. It's just we're more or less certain he was killed in situ. His car was parked down the road, if you can call it a road. Since you're familiar with Jowett, you know what I mean. I'm not exactly a fan. When did you last see Mr. Constantine, sir? A week ago in Clapton? No, Truro. Who took you both there? An inquest. We were witnesses. Really? Constantine's stepson was an old friend of mine. He committed suicide in Truro 2 months ago. You probably read about the case. He got quite a lot of publicity at the time. Nicky Lanyon. Jordan snapped his fingers. Of course, son of Michael Lanyon. I don't know Neville Constantine was his stepfather. Well, he was. Really? Jordan frowned. Been to Clapton since the inquest, have you, sir? Yes, as a matter of fact, the day after. To see Mr. Constantine. Yes, but he's gone away. Jordan flipped out his notebook and consulted it. A neighbour told us a man was hammering at Mr. Constantine's door in Wharfdale Road late on the night of 27th. That you, sir? I wasn't hammering. It was you. Yes, a matter of considerable urgency. That's what you told the neighbour. You declined to elaborate. Care to do so now? I was hoping to be able to obtain a memento of Nicky. Hardly an urgent errand, surely, sir. I suppose not. There was just a turn of phrase. Not called again since. No, I phoned a couple of times, but I ventured a smile. No luck. Really? The neighbour said Mr. Constantine came on Friday, but you didn't catch him in? It seems not. Think of any reason why Mr. Constantine should be in danger? No. Anyone who might wish him harm? No. Or harbour any violent feelings against him? No. Sufficient to beat him about the head with a tire lever and leave him to die in a ditch. I told you, no, I don't. Alarm bells are ringing inside my brain more loudly with every question. How do you know it was a tire lever? Abandoned by the body, sir. The murderer must have dropped it in a panic. You know the kind of tool I mean? Naturally, being in the car restoration business yourself. Yes, sir, I do see that. No doubt you possess several. Just the one. Not lost in the fire? No, I retrieved quite a few tools from the wreckage. A tire lever amongst them? Yes. Where is it now? In the garage. Mind if I take a look at it? Just check it's still there, I mean. Not at all. Follow me. We walked slowly out of the house and round to the garage, my thoughts racing ahead as we went. I had no alibi for Saturday night. By setting up a meeting with him, Emma had ensured I wouldn't have. The anonymous late night phone call would have been her check-in. I waited in, and she'd had access to the garage when dropping the car off. A very ugly fit up was beginning to take shape. Here we are, I announced, unlocking the garage door. Here, I think I remember where I left it. Let's hope so, sir. I swung the door open, switched on the light, and walked down beside the car to the box standing against the wall in the corner. The tools didn't look to have been stirred, but even as I began to sort through them, I knew the Talia wasn't going to be there. It was in a forensic science lab in Essex, bagged and tagged, with Constantine's blood and my fingerprints all over it. Emma Morasco had proved herself too clever for both of us. Found it, sir? I stood from the door. No, I stood up and turned face it. I'm afraid not. Thank you for listening.